Hello and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Fraser Clarke, and joining me after a Hamilton Accies-esque global IT outage affecting only his home was sorted is Shaughan Elderbrant. Shaughan, it's 2 days later than we planned, but how's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. It's fair to say, if you are listening, this is us recording on Wednesday. We did try and record this previously on Monday, and it was an absolute fucking disaster. We got about 4 minutes in, then the microphone that I was using just decided not to work. Then we decided to start again using just a laptop microphone, and then that was working fine. But then my internet was just decided to go out. My Wi-Fi was working, but on Google Chrome or any kind of Internet Explorer, I was just blocked from viewing any form of website. So I've got no idea what happened, but here we are on Wednesday. How are you, Fraser?
I am very well, and if that's not a sign of what's to come in this podcast, that it literally blocked your internet access, then I don't know what is. We are doing things a wee bit differently with Shaughan and Telfer and Sean McGuigan otherwise engaged. We are doing too good, too bad things from, well, I was going to say this weekend, last weekend's lower league games. It felt more like this weekend when we started recording this on Monday. And we'll start with you, Shaughan, who is itching to speak about one very good performance from Saturday.
Yeah, this is very true. Very much looking forward to talking about this. Unfortunately, wasn't at the game as I was working at the League Cup semi-finals over the weekend, doing social stuff for the SPFL. But let's kick off with Falkirk's resounding 6-0 win over Greenock Morton, which put the Bairns 6 points clear at the top of the William Hill Championship. It's been an incredible start for Falkirk, coming up from League One and pretty much carrying that momentum from last season's title win in League One into this season, and this was by far and away the best performance of the season so far, absolutely blowing Morton away with 6 goals, no reply. 2 goals in the first half, the first one coming from Keelan Adams, lovely headed goal, second one from Ethan Ross, and then after the half-time interval, I think it was only within the first minute of the second half, Falkirk won a penalty after some really good play, nice wee turn from Dylan Tate, and I think it was Gary Oliver, I think, was halved by Jack Baird, just kind of caught in the melee. Brad Spencer scores, 2 more are added, and then Brad Spencer rounds off the scoring with an absolute thumper to make it 6-0. And yeah, pretty much everything that could go right for Falkirk on this day went spectacularly right. I think I managed to catch some of the game when it was happening, but having watched the highlights back, particularly the second half performance, it was just absolutely relentless from Falkirk. Wave after wave, chance after chance. And Falkirk have been criticised, well, not criticised, but fans have maybe been slightly critical of Falkirk in times recently when they've had lots of chances, created lots of chances, and maybe haven't scored as many goals as they probably should have. On Saturday, that was very much a different story. Like I say, 6 goals and very, very well worthy of those 6 goals, and it could have been more, to be honest.
Let's talk about Keelan Adams, the first goal scorer, because I think he's been one of the finds, well, no, there's no I think. He has been one of the finds of the season in the SPFL. Just how good is Keelan Adams? Because I look at him, I'm looking at him physically and looking at him in the Friday night games and highlights. Like, he looks like somebody who could go all the way. I know he's 22 now, so it's not like he's 18, 19. But, I like to think I've got an eye for a right back because Nicky Devlin and Paul McGinn, I both tipped for Scotland call-ups, and it happened about 10 years after I tipped it. Like, could we be looking at somebody who has that potential, certainly to go on and play in the Premier League, and if not, kick on maybe a wee bit more?
I think certainly in terms of what we've seen so far in his kind of early showings at Falkirk, he's a very good football player. He's very, in terms of technically very decent, but it's just his size, his athleticism, and his willingness to get up and down that right wing. It's constant. The way the Falkirk attack down either wing. I think most of Falkirk's kind of best attacking play comes from the wings. The likes of Tate and Spencer in the middle, they dictate the play, and then it's the likes of on the right hand side, Adams and Calvin Miller on the right hand side, and then Leon McCann or Sean Mackey and Ethan Ross on the left hand side, and it's just those. The Tyler's running up and down, the interchanges of play, and Keelan Adams, just the way that he's able to constantly get round the outside of Calvin Miller. Calvin Miller, obviously a left-footed player, wants to come in on his left, but Keelan Adams is constantly down that right-hand side, and he's always given him an option. And I just think, in terms of physicality and what he's shown in terms of, he was playing Lowland League football just 6 months ago, and the fact that he stepped up to championship level, and he already looks like one of the best fullbacks in the division, having played a grand total of 12 games, and yeah, he looks fantastic. Falkirk have literally just tied him down to a longer term contract. Quite funny, if we'd recorded this on Monday, it wouldn't have been the case, but maybe it was written in the stars for my internet to go down. But yeah, just yesterday, Tuesday, Falkirk have announced that they've tied Keelan Adams down until I think it's 2026, which, for the securing his long-term future, either at Falkirk or just securing the club's future in terms of if he's going to kick on and go elsewhere at some point, which based on how he's been playing since he's came into the club, it wouldn't surprise me if he was to end up getting poached by a Premiership club or even down south.
Down south was something I was thinking about, because I think I might have told this on the podcast before, but there was a Suns player I was talking to a wee while ago who had mentioned that he got, I don't know if he ever got an offer, but he certainly had interest from a club in League Two a few years ago when he was playing full-time football at that time. But and they said, you fit the physical stature of what we're looking for a player. So like we think we can work with what you've got physical attributes wise, like improve you technically and then make you an effective player. And you look at Keelan Adams and you just think, if you were to design a fullback, that's exactly what you'd be looking for. So I wonder how many clubs already down south are just starting to take an interest purely based on physique above all else and going, he's got everything that we need in terms of raw attributes. Let's see how he progresses before, we maybe take a punt and try and develop him a bit more to make him more, I don't know, English League One or English Championship or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. And I mean, you look at Brendan Dickinson, who joined Queen of the South over the summer. He looks like a really decent football player, but he's just a big athletic laddie, and you can see why he's played many games in an EFL League Two. Yeah, I think Keelan's got all the attributes to potentially, move on and progress his career. I think there's been a bit of chat just around him this week. I don't know if it was maybe an open goal that he got a bit of a talking up, people saying that he could, potentially progress his career. But obviously it's early days and you don't want to big him up too much, but the early signs are very promising, and I do think that Falkirk have found a real gem.
Tell you what, he's 10 times the player that Tom Dallison was, and he had a pretty good career in English League too. So,
well, this is very true. Yeah, Tom Dallison signed him as, I think it was Brighton's under-23 captain, and then the less said about what happened after that, the better.
Did he play up front in a game under Ray McKinnon, or he got punted on up there? Did I imagine that?
Yes, that definitely happened. I was there. I don't know if it maybe happened more than once, but I distinctly remember him getting thrown on, maybe at home to Ross County or Partick Thistle, and he didn't look any worse than he did at centre back. Let's just put it that way.
That's the physical attributes that Crawley Town were after. Just a really big lad. He'll do. Just before we sum up Falkirk, because we're on quite a tight time schedule today, but something that's really impressed me about them has been that Falkirk have had big injuries to key players, and the guys who have came in, I'm looking at Ethan Ross and I'm looking at Gary Oliver here, potentially Gary Oliver more so in terms of, I think everyone knows how good Ethan Ross is. I think it was maybe like, if you're a team that's, let's be honest, looking to win the league, is Gary Oliver who you want up front? Maybe not based on it previously, but these are guys who have really came onto a game, and Falkirk now have a side where there are players in the best form of their career. I think you can make an argument for certainly playing some of the best football of their career, Gary Oliver and Ethan Ross being two of those.
Absolutely. I think you look at the back end of last season in Falkirk, or even just the whole of last season in League One, Falkirk's probably three main attacking players were Calvin Miller, who is still in the starting 11, Ross McKeever, who's been injured for the past 6 weeks, I think, and Callum Morrison, who's been missing through a mixture of injury and illness. He's just got back. I think it was he came back a few weeks ago, but then was back out again, but returned from the bench at the weekend, which is great to see. But those were three massive players, two of which haven't been available for a good chunk of this season so far. And you're absolutely right. Gary Oliver's came in, fitted into that Ross McKeever position, but playing a slightly different role. He doesn't have, of course, the same kind of height and the ability to win flick-ons like Ross McKeever, but Gary Oliver's such an intelligent footballer. He's able to drop in. He's really, for his stature not being as big as Ross McKeever, he's really strong. He's decent at holding up the play, and he's linked the play really well in the same kind of way that McKeever does. And then Ethan Ross, he was fantastic last season for when he was part of the team, but for the most part, he had to sit on the bench because Calvin Miller and Callum Morrison were absolutely banging in goals, setting up assists, and whatnot else. But Ethan Ross has really profited from this, running the team at the start of the season, and you could arguably say that he may be the most in form or the best player in attacking positions in the Championship at the moment. He's absolutely flying. Every time that he picks up the ball, he's positive. He's wanting to drive forward, take players on. He's so confident, and he's got that quality as well. I think that he's someone who can, really kick on and be a key player for Falkirk across the whole of this season. And then potentially, if Falkirk were to get promoted, be a decent Premiership player for either Falkirk, or if they weren't to get promoted, then move on to a Premiership club. If I'm sure there'll be the likes of, I don't know, Ross County, Motherwell, St Johnstone, who will probably look at someone like Ethan Ross and think, he could do more than enough for us.
So we've spoken about Falkirk's attacking riches. We've spoken about Falkirk being the best team in the Championship. Shall we talk about the worst team in the Championship? A team with no attacking riches whatsoever. And we are talking about Airdrieonians. They are my pick for my first bad from the weekend. Airdrie lost 4-0 at home to Hamilton Accies. Now, I think for Airdrie in any season, losing at home to Hamilton Accies full stop, it's going to be a wee bit sore. Getting trounced off an Accies team who, okay, they've put together a couple of good results this season, but who aren't any great shakes. They're not going to be challenging at the top end of the league. When you're in the form that Airdrie are in, is probably just about the worst result that they could have got. And this is the highlights for this actually are really entertaining, because it's probably fair to say it's not as one-sided a game as the 4-0 would suggest. Certainly in the first half, Airdrie do have their chances. There's a moment where Charlie Albinson pulls off one of the best saves that I have ever seen, where he just sort of dives and flicks it over the crossbar with his wrist. It is a brilliant save. But it doesn't get around the fact that Airdrie are so weak going forward this season. Obviously, we know they've had big overhaul in the summer. They know they had key players leaving. But you look at things, or you look at the kind of blunt stats, they've had 6 goals this season, 1 clean sheet, lowest scorers in the SPFL, one of the lowest number of clean sheets. My team does not have any clean sheets, however, so we're at least below them. They just look so weak, so low on confidence. They look like they're being bullied a wee bit. Like they look like they just look like a team that have completely lost their direction. And I think you can see that after it's just 1 minute, 5 seconds in the highlights. And Terrell Adjumang, who went off after 27 minutes in this game, I noticed he got booked as well. So I'm assuming that was a tactical one. He plays one of the worst passes you'll see. It's like, when you're playing football at school and then you pass the ball to the guy who doesn't really want to be there. He just does it because he's with his pals, but he doesn't really like football that much. You're just his pals. And he just kind of kicks it the direction that he's sort of facing. That's what Terrell Adjumang does. Loses the ball, leads to a goal. It is deflected in the end, and it's, the ball progresses up to the other end of the pitch. But you look at that, and that looks like the goal that a team that are going to be relegated concede. And then you keep watching the highlights, and you see the third goal, which is probably one of the funniest goals that you'll see all season. We've both seen our team relegated. I think in every season I've seen us relegated, we've conceded a goal that's been a wee bit like this. If you've not seen it, there's an Airdrie player who's effectively under no pressure defending a set piece. He kind of diving headers it, but misses it, scalps off the back of his head, hits his arse. Ollie Shaw then hits the bar. Craig Watson basically catches it on the line. At this point, the referee doesn't give anything. I don't know if he's just waiting to see how the game progresses, but Watson basically catches it on the line. Kieran Wright in goals then sort of has the ball in his grasp, but then just meekly flaps it straight back out to where Kevin O'Hara is, and he slams it in, and the Airdrie commentator goes, I don't know if you've seen the Airdrie highlights, he goes, this is an MESS from Airdrie. Yes, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you say, it is just one of those goals that typifies where Airdrie are at the moment. They are really, really struggling towards the bottom of the table. And yeah, that third goal, so I did watch the highlights, and the first one was bad, but that third one is just, it's crazy how it ends up in the back of the net, or how it didn't end up in the back of the net initially. The whole thing of it cracking off the bar and then just being handed onto the post, and then it just breaks to Kevin O'Hara, who just goes, well, is it a goal? No, I'll just put it in anyway. Yeah, it was just a really bad goal to concede, and one which just kind of summed up the whole afternoon and Airdrie's season as a whole so far. And where does the Airdrie go next? They travel to Falkirk to take on a team which just won 6-0 at the weekend. And, it's one of those things. Airdrie's one of those fixtures for Falkirk over the past few years. Go back to playing them regularly in League One. I wouldn't say it was one which I feared as a Falkirk fan, but it was one which I absolutely dreaded because just for the most part, Airdrie absolutely had Falkirk's number for many years. But, you come into this game and it's a totally different kettle of fish. Falkirk are obviously absolutely flying at the top of the table and Airdrie are absolutely toiling at the bottom of the table. There's no reason why if Airdrie turn up on the day, set up correctly, why they can't turn up and get something out of the game. But the way that both teams are going at the moment, if both teams play like they did on Saturday, if Falkirk play like they did on Saturday, and if Airdrie play like they did on Saturday, then it could be 6, 7, 8-0. It genuinely could be.
I think the big thing that would stop Airdrie getting anything from that game is the fact that they simply cannot score goals. Like they put, I think, a lot of eggs in the Ben Wilson basket, and we've spoken about him a few times in the podcast because he started the season phenomenally well. He started the season with a hat-trick or 4 or however many it was he got against East Kilbride. He then scored the injury time winner against Dumbarton. He then scored a brilliant finish up at Pittodrie, and he looked such a good signing because he was maybe different to what they'd had before in terms of they'd had players like Todorov, like Callum Gallagher, who were awkward or physical and things like that, whereas Ben Wilson just looked like he had that touch in front of goal. He had that wee bit of finesse that he knew how to finish. You gave him a chance and he was razor sharp tucking it away. Then, for some reason, it's deserted him since the League Cup. I don't think he scored a league goal yet. He looks completely short of any confidence. They can't really play in a way that suits him, I don't think. And when Todorov left Airdrie, I know he wasn't, Nikolai Todorov is not the most aesthetically pleasing footballer in the world. And I think there might have been a feeling when he left Airdrie, it's like, right, if we are going to push for top 4 seriously or start pushing towards the Premiership, we're going to need a better player than Nikolai Todorov. They haven't brought one in. And he's actually the sort of player who, see if it's not going well and you just need to lump the ball long, basically play for, a wee bit of percentages as people say, or scrap away or battle away. He maybe is what you need when you're up at the wrong end of the table and you're trying to battle against that, and they don't have that. And right throughout the team, actually, that looks like a problem at Airdrie, where there are guys who are technically nice footballers, but there's a real lack of horrible, experienced, archetypal Airdrie players. Where's Paul Lovering? Where is prime Paul Lovering when you need him? Somebody just to go in and really grab that team. That's why I think they're missing Callum Fordyce. That's why I think they're missing Rhys McCabe being out on the pitch. And they're missing really anything a wee bit different up front. I know that Aaron Reid has maybe made a bit of a difference in terms of just being that physical presence up there at times. But Aaron Reid was a guy who didn't score for Peterhead last season, who was a kind of bit part player for Elgin the season before that. He might be a project player. I can see that aspect because, again, like we spoke about with Keelan Adams, the physical attributes are there. But he's not somebody who's ready to be starting every single game in the Championship or anywhere near that at the moment. But it feels like Airdrie are so limited in options that he's somebody that they've had to get and had to play a lot more than they would have done, and who possibly looks, I don't want to say he looks better than he is, that's a harsh thing to say, but he's made to look slightly better just because he's offering something different. I think Rhys McCabe's post-match was interesting as well, because to me, McCabe's always been a manager who's got a bit of an edge about him. It just looked like it had gone a wee bit. Just looked like he'd lost his way a wee bit. And he said, I had it written down, football, a simple game made hard at times. And you're like, this doesn't feel like the sort of thing that Rhys McCabe, when they're up and flying, or when he's confident and believes in his side, would be saying. It felt like there was an awful lot, there was an awful lot of him that had lost belief in what are ultimately his teammates, because he is still a player manager, but who maybe lost a bit of belief in what he's built there, and who's, I don't want to say sick of it, but it's been a big rebuilding job over the summer. It's not gone particularly well, and he's now looking at it going, all that good work, all the phenomenal work that Rhys McCabe did to get them promoted, to win the Challenge Cup, to have them challenging for the playoffs, it gets eroded very quickly because football boards have short memories. So you've gone from somebody who, at the end of last season, was probably one of the most in-demand managers in the country. If he had gone to Hibs or St Johnstone, you would have gone, yeah, that's fair enough, that's an earned move. To now someone who other boards, certainly higher up the food chain, will look at and go, oh, we quite liked what McCabe did, but Airdrie have been so poor this season, maybe he's not worth a gamble.
Yeah, it feels really harsh on Rhys McCabe, just in the way that, like you said, the good work that he's put in over a few years, taking them from, not being in the Championship for a decade to, like you say, promotion, winning the Challenge Cup and having a fantastic season last season. And it just feels like that, there seems to be a good turnover of players at Airdrie each season, as there are with the majority of clubs around a kind of similar size in Scottish football. But it just feels like it's been too much of a turnover in this summer. Like you say, the likes of Telfer, Todorov, even like Callum Gallagher, while he didn't play much last season, these are the kind of guys who are probably good to have around the dressing room and good to, obviously have on the park now and again to chip in with the occasional goal or two. But just, it feels as though they've had to change too much over the summer. They've brought in a lot of young players who, as you say, maybe project players. Project players are fine if they are going to be part of a project which has still got a stable footing, but it just feels as though it's so unbalanced and it's just a bit messy.
I did see that Airdrie signed Flynn Duffy, formerly of Inverness, so he was one of the players let go by Inverness. Would you like to guess who Flynn Duffy's agent is?
Jackie McNamara.
It is, yes. That was the most unsurprising thing that I have seen. I literally, as soon as I saw Flynn Duffy, Airdrie signed him, and I thought, okay, like Flynn Duffy is a fine League One player. I think based on what I've seen of him, that's maybe his level as the lower half of League One, but okay, fair enough. You're bringing him in to bulk out the squad. He's available. He's probably guessing relatively cheap given what's gone on at Inverness and the fact he'll just be keen to get playing and especially test himself at that level. But I was like, I wonder who his agent is. Straight onto Transfer Market, Concilium Sports. Stop signing players from one agency and you might not be like this. Just a wee word for Hamilton though. I obviously saw them in the TV game against Falkirk where they absolutely stank the place out. They were horrific that night. They looked the part here. They looked really, well, they didn't look the part because their kit is terrible. They played the part here in a terrible kit that looks like a sort of amateur rugby team kit. But fair play. That's 2 good results in a row after beating Morton.
Yeah, I think Accies have got a decent squad. Last season, when as I say, take it back to the start of last season in League One, and I would have looked at Hamilton's squad and put it just about on a par with Falkirk. So obviously, the way that the season panned out was that wasn't the case. But I think they've came up from a fairly strong base, and there's some real talented players in there. Obviously bringing back Connor Smith, that's a bit of a coup. He did really well in his loan spell there. I think he went down south. Was it Scunthorpe that he went to? I don't know. I don't think he set the header alight there, but a talented player in his day. Obviously came back up with St Johnstone. Maybe not quite at the level to be playing Premiership football at the moment, but I think he's a good player. I think they've got a decent squad, and there's no reason why they can't be getting themselves on a good footing and trying to push for the playoffs. Whether they're able to make it or not, that's a different story. But they don't have a bad squad whatsoever.
A very, very funny edit of that goal is on Hamilton's Twitter as well. If you've not seen it, go on and you will enjoy that because it is excellent. Yeah.
Shout out to Ben Patterson, the Accies media guy. It was very, very good stuff.
If we are talking about Accies heading in the right direction, we will move on to talk about one of your bad picks, and that is a team who are heading in the wrong direction by the looks of it, Ayr United.
Yeah, it's one of those. It feels almost slightly harsh to put Ayr in a bad column, for the fact that they're still third in the league. But they just seem to be kind of trending in the wrong direction at the moment. Defeated 2-0 by Wraith in the Friday evening game. Managed to catch all of this one. I don't think it was anywhere near the best Friday night championship game we've had over the years. There's been some absolute crackers. This one was fine. It was okay. There's some decent action, some good talking points and whatnot. Wraith coming away with a 2-0 win. Lewis Jameson with both the goals, the first of which comes from a strike from Dylan Easton. Liam Russell is just caught in absolute no man's land in the goal. I think he's almost predicting that Dylan Easton's going to maybe, I don't know, take a touch and shoot the other way. I'm really not too sure. Just miles out of his goal. Easton shoots, ball's dipping, gets a hand to it, but Jameson's there to tap home. And the second goal, I'm trying to actually remember back to it now, but I think it was a finish from close range. But Jameson was, he was really busy all evening, had plenty of chances. And I mean, another one, we'll mainly talking about Ayr here, but a big shout out to Lewis Stevenson, who was undoubtedly the man of the match, putting in a phenomenal wing-back performance as if he was 26 rather than 36, which I think he alluded to in the post-match interview, saying that I'm almost 37 as well. So fair play to him. But yeah, Ayr just look a bit they just seem like they've lost that bit of momentum at the moment. Scott Brown was speaking after the game, and he said that his selection choices. He basically took full responsibility for the result, the way it panned out, and he said that he wanted to make the game a bit of a battle, picking some more physical players, maybe across the midfield and such, rather than the likes of Jay Henderson and Marco Roos, who were left in reserve, and it just didn't really work out for them. I think it was a fairly end-to-end game in terms of patterns of play, but in terms of real clear-cut chances, Ayr didn't make too many, and Wraith made quite a fair few, and obviously scored their 2 goals and were well worthy of the win.
I didn't see any of this game because I was out at your regular haunt of the Falkirk Stadium watching East Stirlingshire against Broomhill, but I have watched the highlights from it. The first thing to say is that Lewis Stevenson's cross for the second goal is absolutely glorious. I've just sat and watched the cross coming in a few times because he hits it so nicely. But there are 2 things that worry me about Ayr. You've kind of touched on one, which is the goalkeeping situation. So Robbie Much is obviously out on loan. Harry Stone started the season as number 1. To be fair, I don't think he could have too many complaints about losing his spot because he had made a few mistakes, and a few of them were, they were quite costly looking mistakes, or they were quite daft mistakes, just a wee lack of attention or something like that. So I don't think there's a major issue with dropping him. But then you've brought in Liam Russell, who is young and looks like he's maybe just a wee bit too young for that level. What I would say is, from being at that Broomhill East Stirling game, Ollie Ekrapont, who they've got in their youth team, who's I think Scotland under-17s or under-18s goalkeeper, he looks phenomenal. He is going to be absolutely excellent when he doesn't look like he's about 11 years old. But, that's maybe, 5-6 years down the line before he'll be Ayr's number 1, if not go on to higher than that. But the goalkeeping situation worries me, and I think that, or I expect to see Harry Stone back in goals for this weekend, because I don't think Russell, he didn't cover himself in glory for the first goal. And it's almost just that, again, don't want to lay everything at his door, but the ball forward to Easton to get the shot away was so simple, they just weren't set up properly. Now that falls on the defenders as much as the goalkeeper, but I do think if you've got, not that Harry Stone's a huge amount more experienced, but maybe is a bit more experienced and he's been playing at a higher level, just that wee bit more to say, right, we need a defender to come across and cover. We know that Easton's going to try and make that wee run in between the fullback and the centre half. That's where you need to be. The other thing is, and it's again a fairly obvious thing to say, but since Anton Dowd's injury, Ayr United's form, they don't look the same team without him. And that's understandable when you're losing a guy who started the season in phenomenal form, who was such an important player for them last season. But it does look like the Dowd's injury, the goalkeeping mistakes are one, but the Dowd's injury is what's really, really going to hurt them, maybe longer term, and potentially has derailed any title challenge before it's even got started.
Potentially, of course, it is early days, but I think that, Anton Dowd's injury isn't as bad in itself, but I think the fact of just how well he and George Oakley seem to have struck up a partnership. George Oakley's got 4 goals this season, but I don't think he's scored since Anton Dowd has been injured as well, which is quite telling. And, you're having to replace someone who is your main focal point as in terms of a goal scorer. Alfie Babbage coming in, Alfie Babbage is I think he's a cracking young player, really, really decent player, but again, still a rather young player to be relied upon to be a main goal scorer for a team with aspirations of getting promoted to the Premiership. It is, it's a real, quite a burden to bear. I think, he had probably his best chance, barring the disallowed goal, which Mark McKenzie headed home, and, probably quite a dubious disallowed goal. I don't know if you've seen it, Fraser, but I think it was an alleged foul from George Stanger, who was, kind of climbing up to head the ball down, and then McKenzie nodded it home. I think Ayr United fans can feel probably a bit aggrieved about that. But in terms of, I think Scott Brown's still trying to find that right formula for them going forward in terms of the attacking areas, because you can't replace Anton Dowds in terms of, they don't have anyone, I don't think they've got anyone who can replace his goals, outright, but it's then trying to find out what's the best way to play to try and, create goals from other positions when we don't have Anton Dowds. Like I say, you've got Alfie Babbage, you've got Conor McLennan who can play kind of centrally. I think Ethan Walker sometimes plays through the middle as well. Mark McKenzie can probably play centrally too, but none of these players have as yet shown that they're maybe the right person that's going to kick Ayr on and move them back up towards trying to push right at the top of the table. It's a real quandary, and it's one which I think Ayr have. It's probably no secret that Ayr have had a right good go this season. They've recruited really well in terms of the players that they've brought in, but just that one big injury may just be too big an injury for them to overcome. Obviously, plenty of time to go in the season. Loads of things can change, but they just seem to be stumbling a wee bit.
If George Oakley is going to break his goal drought as well, he's going to do it at Capello on Friday night, isn't he? Like, that's just perfectly set up. If you can't break it there, then that's it. That's both your strikers out. The only thing that I would sum up by saying this game is just a wee word for Raith. And Neil Collins, I think it was his first game, was that game at Somerset Park where they went 2-0 up and lost the game 3-2. I think that was Neil Collins' first game in charge.
Yeah, I think so.
It felt like there had been a big change since then, and it feels like this Raith team have just started to settle down a wee bit. He's maybe starting to just imprint on them what he's looking for. They look a lot better as a team, just a lot more structured, sensible than they were after the Ian Murray sacking on the first day. I guess that's probably played a major role in destabilising things and players not really knowing what they're doing or whether they're coming or going or whatever. But a couple of half-decent signings, Fankity Dabo being obviously a kind of major one in terms of the experience that he brings in and the pedigree that he's got as well. But yeah, it looks like Neil Collins is stabilising that Wraith ship, and certainly given Airdrie's form, I don't know if they'll be pushing top 4, but they certainly should be well clear of relegation.
Yeah, I think so. Like you say, that was, I think the Friday night game was maybe the first time in a wee while anyway that I've seen Wraith. Maybe since they played Dunfermline on the telly. I think that was maybe the last time I'd seen them, because I missed when they played Falkirk. I wasn't at the game that game when they won 1-0. But yeah, it looked fine. Looked like they'd kind of much improved from that game against Dunfermline that I'd seen. And yeah, it just seems like Neil Collins is maybe starting to get his ideas across. And I mean, if they can keep Lewis Stevenson, seemingly in a cryogenic chamber, unable to age physically, then I'm sure they'll be just fine.
We will move on and we will talk about League One. We will talk about the most competitive league in the country, I think, still, because it is looking ridiculous in League One, but it is topped by Cove Rangers. They are the side that I've picked for my good, despite the fact they turned in one of the worst first half performances that I've seen from any side this season. And I watch a team who are 9th in League One. So that gives you an idea of what we're talking about. I know that you have been through this game on like Y-Scout or wherever it was that you watched it, because I don't think either club has put highlights up. Suns in the first half, I think, had 8 shots on target. Cove did not have a shot on or off target. 5 minutes into the second half, Mark Durnan turns across into his own net and Cove Rangers go on to win the game 3-0. Now, the reason that I have picked Cove for my good is because not only did they only turn up for one half, they ended up winning the game very, very comfortably in the end. And that, to me, looks like a sign of a team who are going to be doing something positive this season. And I have been pretty critical of Cove this season, certainly when I've been on the podcast, in terms of saying I'm not really sure what the aim is now. They felt like they were just drifting, and Roman Burrell's goals last season, I think, papered over a lot of cracks. Actually, this year, maybe they'll be all right. So I was on triple duty at the weekend, so that's my paper plus the Sunday Mail plus the Record, so needed to speak to Paul Hartley. He's the most relaxed I've ever seen him. He was actually conversational. He's actually nice. Like, not that he's directly unpleasant, but he's one of the managers who's maybe a wee bit more prickly with you at times. And I know it's easy to be nice after a 3-0, but he was like really, really honest. And I'd said to him, is it when you got the players in at half time, was it one of the ones where you almost don't need to say anything because the boys know themselves it wasn't good enough? And he just kind of smiled and went, no, I had a fair few things to say. So that's the sort of openness that I'd feel like you don't get that much from Hartley. So it felt like he was confident, he believed in them, he knew they were going to turn it around. And that's something, again, that I don't associate with Paul Hartley. So I don't know if it's him maturing as a coach and maturing as a manager, if it's just that he has this belief in the squad of players he's got, or really what the deal is there. But fair play to them, because in the second half, as soon as they took that lead, they did not look like losing. What I would say is probably very unusual for an SPFL Team of the Week to have a goalkeeper in it who is from a team that won 3-0, because Balint Demas in that game was outstanding. And I was talking to a few people at Cove afterwards. Nick Suman obviously started the season as number 1. He's a goalkeeper, or certainly one of the best goalkeepers in League One. He's got experience playing in the A-League. Well, that's a good sign for being a goalkeeper, given their pedigree. The Mark Birighitti Award, or Mark Birighitti getting the A-League's Golden Glove a few seasons ago. But anyway, he's got experience in the A-League, so he started the season as number 1. And Balint Demas came in when Nick Suman got injured and has been undroppable, basically, from what they were saying. That everyone expected that Demas would come in, and then as soon as Suman was fit, which he was at the weekend, then he would be back into the side. No, it's not looking like happening. And if you were to sculpt a goalkeeper, because I was stood beside him at the end, Balint Demas is exactly what you'd look for. He is colossal. He is so tall. And then he's just, it's like there's not an ounce of fat on him, but he's wide. He just must be absolutely ripped. It's like if you got Craig Gordon's sort of build with that height and that frame, and then you just put him in the gym quite solidly for maybe 3 or 4 years, that's Balint Demas's build. And he must be so imposing. And he made a host of good saves in that first half, really kept him in the game. Second half turns around, our goalkeeper makes a mistake, the ball ends up in the back of the net, Mitch Megginson rifles one in from about 20-25 yards, and that's it, the game's over. And a good goalkeeper, I think they say, can win you 12 to 15 points a season. He's probably won Cove 3 points there already, and how important that could be by the end of the season, well, I don't know. I didn't fancy Cove at all this year. At half-time, if you'd asked me, I'd be like, no, we can finish above these guys. At full-time, I went, oh, they just had a half off, because they popped the ball about really nicely in the second half. They were so comfortable. Yeah, it was very much a game of two halves, but fair play to Cove, because I did not see that coming at half-time.
Yeah, the performance from Balint Demas that you mentioned, I've kind of scanned through the kind of best bits on Wyscout, or through the footage that I've seen. The save from the header from Matty Shields is fantastic. Just a big towering header. It seems for all the world it's going to end up in the back of the net. It's just a big paw, just tips it over the crossbar, and then I think there's a double save from maybe, I think it was good run from Mikey Ruth, and then he's kind of saved one and then tipped another onto the post. Yeah, I think, as you say, a good goalie is one of the most important positions on the park. If you've got a decent keeper, it's not even just about being able to make good saves at good times. It's almost just having that kind of bedrock that the back four and the midfield and whatnot are confident in, that they know that they have someone there behind them who can occasionally dig them out if need be. And yeah, Cove, it's a weird one, because you look back maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks, I can't think for the life of me exactly when, but they were down towards the bottom end of the league, right towards the start of the season, and now joint top on points. Really, really impressive turnaround. It's been one of those ones where across League One so far this season, just quietly things have been changing. Arbroath are third after being seemingly like they couldn't buy a win for the first 5-6 weeks as well. I think it is by far and away the most competitive division in the country. Everyone looked at the Championship this season saying that's the one that's going to be the absolute cesspit, but it really is League One. It's been unbelievable so far, and it would be even more so if Inverness hadn't gone into administration. So yeah, really, a bit of a mad division at the moment, and Cove, as you say, just kind of almost out of nowhere just have started picking up results and rightfully top in the table. That Mitch Megginson goal as well was an absolute cracker.
The Megginson goal is so good. It was one of those ones that gets like applause from all the people round about it. So like there were Suns fans in the stand who were like that stage where you applaud the goal, but you also go, right, we've dominated things in the first half. Then our captain stuck the ball into his own net and they've scored like an absolute rasper from however far out it is, 20-25 yards out. Maybe this isn't going to be our day. You've got that horrible resigned feeling from it. But I was on double duty, like I said, or triple duty as it is, doing it for the Nationals. I needed to get a Cove player. So naturally, I got Mitch Megginson, who during his time at Dumbarton did not miss a single game across 2 seasons. He was a really, really big player for us, particularly 2013-14 when we challenged for the playoffs. That would have been first season, the playoffs, I think, in the SPFL. And he was just a guy who I loved when he was a Dumbarton player. So got a wee chat with Mitch afterwards, and I said, you know what that goal reminds me of? Remember the goal you scored against Dundee United about 10, 11 years ago? And he was like, yeah, remember it? Cut inside Sean Dillon, just like had a swing at it, cracked it away. I was like, yeah, it was great. So then it was me, our programme editor, Graham, and then Jack from the rival paper that I cannot name, all basically just reminiscing for like 5-10 minutes about the Ian Murray era Dumbarton team and like some of the goals Mitch had scored and everything. It was just really, really nice. So a big criticism that has been levelled at Cove by I think all of us on this podcast has been that they are still or have still been reliant on kind of the same core of players that got them up. Mitch being one of them, Blair Yule being one of them. That does feel like it's maybe starting to change. So in this game, both Adam Emsley and Dylan Lobban out wide. I think both are known from Aberdeen, younger players. So whether or not they'll get a chance at Pittodrie or whether they'll maybe see their future at Cove longer term, both of them played really, really well, particularly in the second half. Emsley got a goal, Lobban got an assist, albeit was a wee bit kind of fortunate in terms of the way that the ball ricocheted through and then off Mark Durnan and into the net. But they looked like what Cove were missing. Just like young, energetic, fresh legs. Emsley maybe a wee bit more skillful, wanting to cut inside and get shots away and things like that. And Lobban a bit more direct, a bit more raw, wanting to go on the outside. But just, they gave Cove something different. Like, we know Megginson's a really good player. We know Blair Yo's a really good player. We know Fraser Fivey's an excellent player. What these guys maybe don't have, Blair Yo to a degree does, but not as much as he used to, is the legs. They've now got these young guys who they can kind of fire balls into the channel. Just you chase that and then cut inside, do something with it, and we'll be up to support. And that's something they did very, very well in the second half. So I was not impressed by Cove at all in the first half. In the second half, that was probably as good as any team has been against Dumbarton. And when you look at it over the piece, you go, well, they've shown defensive solidity, they've shown they have a good goalkeeper, they've shown that they can handle a bit of adversity from being under pressure, and they've shown that attacking threat at the other end and managed the game really, really well. I mean, as soon as they took the lead, there was no doubt they were leaving with all 3 points. So very, very impressed by their second half. And I suppose over a whole 90 minutes, you have to say quite impressed by the performance because they showed a little bit of everything.
How are you feeling about Suns at the moment, Fraser? I know the last time we spoke was, which was a good while ago, you were really high on them despite the fact that they weren't getting the results that they really were looking for. As you say, that kind of first half performance seems pretty much a kind of rinse and repeat of what we'd spoke about maybe like 6 weeks ago or something. How are you kind of feeling about Suns' position at the moment? Is it ninth in the table? I think just one point behind Annan?
Yeah, I think it's still 9th. It's so strange because if you ask any Dumbarton fans, what's the big problem? The big problem is we're not taking our chances. Actually, second, third top scorers in the league. Scored an awful lot more goals than Annan, an awful lot more goals than Inverness. So actually, statistically, the problem's at the other end. We haven't kept a clean sheet all season. If you don't keep clean sheets, you're not going to be winning that many games, and we're giving ourselves a mountain to climb by falling behind in almost every single game that we play. I think, I fell behind at Arbroath, took the lead against Inverness and took the lead against Alloa on the second day of the season and took the lead against Annan back in September and then went down to 10 men after 19 minutes. I think those are the only times Suns have been in the lead or taken the lead in games. They've then fought back. They fought back at Arbroath to take the lead. They obviously took the lead twice against Inverness, things like that. But it's just been a problem that every single week we concede, and by and large we concede first and then you're chasing the game. And this was another example of it. It was very similar to the Montrose game, which actually might have been round about the last time we did a podcast together, because I remember messaging you about it. The Montrose game where Suns had something in the region of 20 shots. Montrose had 1, and Montrose won 1-0. Doesn't really matter how many shots you have, if you're not keeping clean sheets and you're not converting your chances, that's not a great sign. But I do enjoy watching this team. I think that there's a lot of potential there. It's not dissimilar to last season in terms of creating a decent amount and it just not clicking and then being punished for mistakes at the other end. So I think I'm still cautiously optimistic. Certainly, we'll come on to talk about them, certainly hopeful we can finish above Annan Athletic. But that might be a nice place to move on. Would you like to talk about your good from League One?
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile, and I think my good ties into your bad. I think it all kind of ties into one afternoon at the Rex, which ended with Alloa Athletic winning 5-0 over Annan, and it's a win which keeps Alloa level on points with Cove at the top end of the table. As we say, we've just mentioned about Cove there. Cove going really well at the moment. Alloa going equally as well. As we say, watch the highlights through Wasp TV on YouTube. Always a good highlights package. Good commentary as well from Lewis, who I believe does both. I think he does the kind of controlling of the camera and the commentary, which absolutely fair play. Known as someone who does commentary themselves, I can't imagine to just how difficult that must be. But yeah, onto the game. Alloa started really quickly, taking the lead through Cammy O'Donnell, a free kick from a really acute angle, and I think he's just had a crack towards the near post, and it's kind of crept in. It's one of those ones where, like, I think Jamie Smith's kind of got to the ball, but it's over the line, and the linesman seen that it's over the line and has given the goal. The second one comes from a cross from the right hand side, which just really isn't dealt with by the Annan defence. I think that's probably putting it lightly. I'm sure you'll probably come on to it on your section of bad. But we're talking about the good stuff at the moment. So Luke Rankin smashing home the goal, really good left-footed finish. That's his 6th goal in all competitions this season. He's one of those players who has started the season really well. Of course, a youth prospect at Alloa. I think he was actually on the youth books at Falkirk a few years back. He was I'm sure he was on loan at East Stirlingshire last season, and is part of the first team squad so far this season. Looks a real prospect for the future. Just looks really kind of assured and confident in himself, no more so than the goal he scored against Stenhousemuir, the winning goal a week or two ago, where he just took the ball down the left-hand side, cut in and scored. And this one was another absolutely smashing finish. And, we going from one attacker in Luke Rankin to another in Luke Donnelly. And what a game he had, Fraser. 2 goals, 2 of the best goals that you're likely to see anywhere in Scotland, scored by one player in one game, prime Berbatov. It was unbelievable. The first one, cross comes in, I think from Scott Taggart on the right. He's got a defender on him, holds him off, brings the ball down with his right foot, or was it with his left foot? Anyway, then turns the defender with a wee touch with the outside of the right foot and then smashes it home with the left foot. If you haven't seen this goal already, go check out the SPFL socials or go look at Wasp TV. Honestly, it's worth the wait. It's worth a look. Really, really top stuff. And then scored another absolutely cracking goal early in the second half. A long ball from Scott Taggart. Ball bounces. He just sees the keeper off his line and lifts it, cushions it over the goalkeeper. Really, really fantastic finish. And then, as he so often has in his time at Alloa, Connor Salmon scoring what you could probably describe as one of those crap goals that strikers strikers score. That's no criticism. You want your strikers to score crap goals, but one of these ones that the goalie Jamie Smith initially makes a save from Kevin Colley, and Salmon's just there to tap home. Alloa were absolutely flying, and they've started the season so well, having lost probably their best attacking players from last season in the form of Taylor Stephen, Bobby Wales, Ethan Sutherland, even Quinn Coulson as well. Those really good attacking players who brought them so much joy last season in League One. But Andy Graham's changed things around slightly, brought in a few new bodies, a few different bodies, and also just a few guys that have been there before who have kind of came to the fore, and it's just shaping up to be a really decent season at the Rex.
Yeah, I love those 2 Luke Donnelly goals so much. I mean, I've watched them so many times, and I hadn't looked at Alloa's Twitter. I just put the highlights on to watch it, so I didn't know what was coming or what to expect it. I mean, I watched the first goal, or the first goal that Luke Donnelly scores, which is a brilliant finish at Jamie Smith's near post. I'm like, it's really Dimitar Berbatov, the way he's brought that down. He's never really broken into a sprint, but he's actually got away from the defender and then just hammered it high beyond the goalkeeper. And then the second goal comes along, and he manages to lob Jamie Smith, who is, a yard off his line, 2 yards off his line. He's not caught in no man's land. Like, he's basically lobbed a goalkeeper who is almost where you would expect him to be. Why? Luke Donnelly is so good. If he could do this on a consistent basis, like, he would be starting for Scotland. He would be our cult hero striker. But he must be so frustrating because you look at him and go, you are outrageously talented. Like, you are one of the most talented players in the lower leagues. Why don't we see it so much? Why do we only see it every couple of weeks or every couple of months? Because there are probably a handful of players who could score those 2 goals, or maybe, 15 players who could score the first goal and 10 players who could score the second goal. But he can do both, and I'm not sure how many players in the lower leagues could do both. So they are phenomenal finishes, and he's such a good player to watch if you're a neutral, I imagine, because he's capable of doing things like that, and you're not going to get wound up by him when he doesn't do it. You're just like, he didn't do much today. If you support him, it must be so annoying, because you look at him, and what's to say that he won't go this weekend and turn in a performance where you don't really notice him that much? And you think, how do you do it? How'd you do it?
Yeah, totally. As you say, he's one of those players who's just capable of producing those magic moments out of nothing. There was a game earlier on in the season that I seem to remember. I can't remember, was it against Dumbarton that he had a really good game? And I don't know if it was scored or set up, but there was a couple of I remember like similar, like really neat, deft touches that he produced for a couple of goals. And you're like, this is what you want to see from him, like on a consistent basis. But I think he's just one of those kind of mercurial talents of the lower leagues. And it's almost kind of worth the wait when you don't get it for a few weeks, and then he produces something absolutely sublime. Then it's absolutely well worth the wait. I can imagine, as you say, as an Alloa fan or going back as an Arbroath fan or whoever watching him week to week, it probably is quite frustrating. But he's one of those players who's just great fun. He's probably going to end his career with a phenomenal highlights reel. A similar player to that's probably Craig McGuffey, with just about 1 million goals from long range and stuff like that. Maybe not producing consistently enough, but capable of producing spectacular stuff.
He scored a brilliant sort of flick from close range against us, and then I think he teed up Kevin Colley to score, I think it was Alloa's second of the day with like a really nice touch. We've spoken about Alloa. You've spoken about Alloa at great length, and I don't want to basically just copy and paste everything you've said, so I shall talk about Annan Athletics defending. Oh my goodness, this is atrocious. So for all the wonderful striking play from Luke Donnelly and the terrific finishing of Luke Rankin, this is one of the worst defensive performances that I have seen from any side, I think, this season. And I feel like I've heard Craig Telfer say that about Annan's performance against Stenhousemuir earlier in the season. I suppose you maybe start with Jamie Smith, who, for my money, has actually maybe been one of Annan's better performers, certainly from what I've seen. He's sort of papered over quite a lot of cracks in this defence. He's saved them on quite a few occasions. I know that was the case when they played Dumbarton at Gallowbank, and even though Suns were down to 10 men for the vast majority of that game, Jamie Smith kept them in that game before half-time. He makes a mistake for the first goal. You're maybe looking at him and thinking, with the Donnelly lob, should you be being lobbed there? I don't know. But it looks like that shakiness is sort of permeating right throughout the team. They just look like a side with no leaders at the back. And I think that was perfectly summed up by Luke Rankin's goal. So you've got Tommy Muir and you've got Willie Gibson both defending right in the kind of centre half position. And Muir sort of leaves it, ducks, and Gibson doesn't really do anything. So you've got two of your most senior players in the team. Neither one is taking control. Neither one's taking charge. There's a breakdown in communication, and they're ultimately punished for it. But you look at that and think, that can't be happening between your player manager and probably one of the most experienced players in your team. And if that's happening with them, then what are the guys who are maybe taking their first steps or who are nowhere near as experienced going to be doing? It just feels like a real lack of confidence. The other thing that I thought I noticed, and this is maybe something that people who were at the game will know a wee bit better, Alloa aren't a massive physical side, but they just looked so much stronger, fitter, bigger. It almost at times looked like, when you play an English side in a pre-season friendly and they're just that bit bigger and that bit sharper. And you're like, technically they're maybe not much better, but they're just that wee bit more. Alloa did look technically better for what it's worth, but they just looked bigger, stronger, more streetwise, smarter. Annan looked like a bit of a rabble. They did a lot of running, a lot of effort. None of it was good running. And how many times in those highlights do you see Annan players basically head down running towards their own goal? That's got to be the worst sign possible. And we're talking not midfielders trying to track back. We're talking members of their defence head down running towards their own goal because they've been caught out of position. It's massively alarming for Annan. And I think we've spoken about, Suns not keeping clean sheets, and that's been a major issue. Both Suns and Annan have conceded the same number of goals. I think Dumbarton have scored round about double the number that Annan have scored. Impartial Terrace hat off, Suns hat on. I'm hoping that could end up being the difference. But I look at that Annan team and I think, if they're going to defend like that all season, surely we can finish above them, because that today or at the weekend and not for the first time this season looks so far short of what they need.
Yeah, I think that, like you say, that second goal in terms of the taking responsibility thing, it just feels like they're really, obviously they've got experienced players in there, but it's like they're missing a leader in the heart of defence. I don't know if they're probably still kind of reeling from the loss of Matty Douglas over the summer. A big player, big personality in the middle of the back line, someone who will take charge and just head things away. That's kind of one of Matty Douglas's best attributes of his play, as we've seen from attacking throw-ins and stuff like that for Queen of the South. But defending from the back, it was just it looked all over the place. I don't think I can really describe it much better than that. It just looked really, really disjointed, and the manner of which they conceded goals was just really, really poor and really alarming.
No post-match either from Willie Gibson in that one, which I always think is a wee bit of a warning sign that things obviously he's not going to be happy they got trounced away from home, but just a wee bit of a warning sign that things are, or they know things are not going well, and there's not maybe a confidence there to talk about it, to be open about it, and to almost come out and say, look, that was bad today, but we know what we need to sort. It just felt, if I see that, or whenever I see a club basically say, no, there won't be any post-match from a manager, I think one of two things: he's either been sacked, or things are going really, really badly behind the scenes and maybe might be about to get sacked. So who knows? Maybe they'll turn it around, but that's becoming a bit of a trait of Annan this season. I have panned Annan Athletic. I will now move to the exact other end of the country, and I will talk about probably my surprise package team of this season, and a team who haven't got the praise they have deserved. So I am here, Elgin City, for you, to give you the praise that you deserve, because I know that your fans are not pleased that you're not getting it. I can hold my hand up and say, I felt good things were coming under Alan Hale. There are two things that I felt about that. Firstly, Suns played them on the penultimate game of last season, and I really liked what I saw from them. They looked a massively improved team, a lot sharper on the ball, a lot more of a threat. They'd started the 22-23 campaign really, really well, right up in the playoffs, and then their form went off a cliff. They lost Ken Hester over the summer, and it never recovered. At the end of last season, I thought, if Elgin can stay up here, I think they'll have a decent side next year, especially if they can keep the likes of Deshaun Golding, Mark Gallagher. They did that. They've added very impressively to the squad, particularly with Jack Murray, who we'll come on to talk about. But the stats for Elgin are phenomenal this season, and this is shamelessly lifted from their Twitter, but I'm sure they won't mind. 23 points from 11 games, 12 points from 6 away games, the only SPFL team unbeaten out with the Premiership, and the best start to an SPFL season in their history.
Yeah, that makes for very good reading. I think, like you say, they have probably flown somewhat under the radar, but absolutely right in giving Elgin their flowers. It's been so long since Elgin came into the SFL at the time, and I don't think they've, from right to say, I don't think they've been out of the 3rd tier or 4th tier. Sorry. I mean, what a story that would be if Elgin were to get their first senior promotion this season. And I don't think, based on what we've seen so far, I don't think there's any reason to say that they can't be right up there towards the end of the season. I think there's plenty of players who've in that squad who are playing very, very well, probably some of the best football of their career so far. You mentioned Jack Murray, the one of the signings of the summer as well. Has brought real steel to the defence, but as we've seen on Saturday, he can attack balls as well and can score at the other end. I think another one is the signing of Aidan Glavin on loan from Kilmarnock, the goalkeeper. He's been pretty excellent since he's came in. Tom McHale's been the undisputed number one at Elgin for so long now, and I think Glavin was signed over the past couple of months or so, and from what the brief bits that I've seen of him, just looks like a really, really decent young goalkeeper and someone who seems to be relishing playing week on week. I think Russell Dingwall's another player who's been absolutely fantastic this season. Obviously ended up getting sent off at the weekend, but just in terms of what he brings in that midfield, a real driving force, bit of creativity, and the ability to score goals from midfield too. It just seems as though things are clicking in the right place, and it's really nice to see, because for a long time, Elgin have just kind of bobbed around towards the bottom end of League Two, and it's nice to see them, upwardly mobile and properly, we're going to have a right good go at trying to get promoted to League One, and it'd be a fantastic story to see, not only for just Elgin as a club, but it's one of those now, especially with how things have panned out with Cali Thistle, and just in general the way that the disparity between teams in the Lowlands and the Highlands in terms of being able to attract a certain calibre of player for the most part. Most people want to stay in the Central Belt and whatnot. And, there is that risk of, at some point, the SPFL could potentially become just a Central Belt league, and that'd be terrible. Scotland is a country which, stretches all the way up to the Highlands and beyond. So to see those teams up north thriving, it's really good to see, and it'd be class to see Elgin have a right good go this season and, get promoted. That'd be brilliant.
I think a lot has to be said about the job that Alan Hale has done, because he came in at a similar time to Ian McCall at Clyde. He has had a considerably smaller budget, certainly in January, certainly in the summer, albeit I don't doubt that they've obviously, I think last year was maybe the scare that they needed, and there's obviously been a wee bit more investment, tempting players like Jack Murray to the club. But compared to what Clyde must have spent, they're not bringing in 5 or 6 players that you're looking at thinking these are League One, calibre players. They're bringing in players from the Highland League, or bringing in players or back players who were successful on loan. And when you compare the job that Alan Hale has done to the job that Ian McCall did at Clyde, it's night and day. And you think McCall has geography on his side, in terms of it's probably far easier to sign players around the Central Belt and get them to train in Hamilton and play in Hamilton. He's got the contacts in the SFL or the SPFL under his belt. Everyone knows Ian McCall. He's been around for 30 odd years in management. Alan Hale came in from the Highland League as a relative unknown, I think, to most SPFL fans. Now, part of that, and I'll hold my hands up and be one of them, is I don't live in the Highlands, so my Highland League knowledge is shocking. I probably know a reasonable amount about Lowland League or about the West of Scotland League, Highland League. I don't know a lot about it. I know that Alan Hale, I'm sure his Huntly side played Dumbarton in the COVID season. I think he was their manager and Suns won 4-0. That is the extent of my knowledge on Alan Hale. And he came in, and the first couple of games, they took a couple of heavy defeats. And you're kind of looking at it thinking, have they almost brought him in because he knows the Highland League? And they're going, right, we'll probably go down this season, but at least we'll get a gaffer in who knows what he's going to be working with next year. And then they turned it around. And it feels like something special is building at Elgin. I think their crowd at the weekend was somewhere over 700. Got a team with a real identity, got a team with a fight, and they're facing a ridiculous injury crisis at the minute. So it's somewhere in the region of 10 or 11 players out. They've got a bench with very, very limited experience. They go down to 10 men in this game against Stranraer on Saturday after, 55 minutes? A terrible, terrible dive from Russell Dingwall as well. Just a really rubbish way to pick up a second booking. I think his first booking's maybe a wee, that's a bit harsh. His second one, you're like, what are you doing? And I think you almost see him going down and thinking, that was a mistake. Shouldn't have done that. I got booked like 25 minutes ago. That was a mistake. But they've ground out a result. And that's the sign. That's what they're going to need to get across the line. That's the sign of a good team. It looks like everyone's pulling in the right direction. Everyone's pulling in the same direction at Elgin. And I really, really hope that they can get promoted for two major reasons. Firstly, because Borough-Briggs is one of the best away days around. And I think if Suns stay up, I would be delighted to see Elgin in our league again. And secondly, because it's such a pleasant place to watch football. Like, Elgin fans are great. I remember 2 seasons ago, Dumbarton went up there and won 4-0. And I think we scored the fourth relatively late on. I was stood in the terracing behind the goal, the kind of, I don't know what you call it, but like the Astro end of Borough-Briggs, the end where the Astro is. And the Elgin fans going past it were just like, oh, well played, guys. Like, your best team we've played this season. Your guys were excellent. That's just class. It's just really, really nice. So I would be delighted to see Elgin going up. I also want to just mention, because we must do it on this podcast, Stranraer's highlights package. And there's a bit where a flock of geese go over the stadium. And there's some kind of chat between Lawrence Nelson and his co-commentator, whose name I forget, but somebody will remind me, his co-commentator about the flock of geese. And then it kind of pans back down to the ground, and it's just Dylan Gavin being hitting the balls by the ball on the touchline and like collapsing over. Really, really nice. Really, really nice.
It's very, very Simpsons man getting hit by football stuff.
And then there's like a wee flipping comment about, I hope there's not a Mrs. Gavin or something like that. Great. So good. If Elgin have been our surprise stars of this season, certainly in League 2, if not across the whole SPFL, we'll end this podcast by talking about one of the surprise disappointments.
Yeah, I think it's only right that we have a wee chat about Spartans. You know, they were beaten 2-1 away to Peterhead, which kind of takes their dismal run of form to just one win in their last 12 matches in all competitions, a run which stretches all the way back to August, leaves them 7th place in League 2, 1 place behind rivals Edinburgh City. And I mean, I'm sure Spartans fans won't be too pleased with what they're seeing so far. In the game at the weekend, I think it's fair to say that Peterhead pretty much dominated from start to finish. From what I've seen, watched the highlights. Seemed obviously it was a Peterhead club highlights, but I had to look at the match stats and stuff, and it seemed as though it was a fairly comfortable one for Peterhead in terms of chances and whatnot. Didn't end up comfortable with something that we'll come on to, but. First goal for Peterhead comes on, I think, 17 minutes. Andy McCarthy with a lovely ball down the left-hand side. Kieran Dunn, former Falkirk youth, I think he moved on to Sunderland after being at Falkirk. Hit him down the left-hand side. Spartan's defence was playing really, really high and just looked really slow to get back and recover. Decent ball across, and Jack Brown is there to slot home at the back post. You know, I think one thing I kind of noticed from this game in particular was just particularly towards the start of the game, was just Spartans' defence looked a bit cumbersome, and the recovery runs and whatnot. I think it was maybe Paul Watson and Ayrton Sonker that were playing in centre back. You know, two players who aren't particularly the quickest, and I think they were punished for that lack of pace in that first goal. But Spartans would go on to level things up pretty shortly after. Ball swung into the box, bit of a melee in the box, and Bradley White able to force home from close range. But I think Peterhead looked really, really pretty decent in this. Played some pretty nice stuff, likes of Max Barry, Andy McCarthy, Dylan Forrest, all linked together, flowing quite well. Blair Carswell had to make a few decent saves from strikes from range, and then Peterhead would win a penalty in the second half, probably about midway through. Spartans' defence was just cut open too easily, and there was a handball in the area. The ball was clipped back to Jack Brown, who goes to head it. It's hard to see in the highlights, but from what you can gather from the reactions of players on the pitch, it seems as though it was fairly clear cut. Hits a hand, penalty given, and I think it was maybe from Kieran Watson, not 100% sure. But anyway, Max Barry steps up, wrong foots Carswell, slots it away, and then Spartans go on to win a penalty of their own despite being really under the cosh. And it was kind of similar sort of situation. Another handball, free kick taken from, I can't remember exactly who it was that took the free kick, but from 25 yards out, curls a free kick, hits an arm. I think it was maybe the arm of Dylan Forrest, and then the referee points to the spot. Blair Henderson steps up to take the penalty. Blair Henderson, a player who is one of the best goal scorers in League Two, one of the best goal scorers in the lower leagues, but isn't in a great run of form at the moment. Coolly steps up. You think he's just got to roll it into the bottom corner, but it bounces back off the post, and he now just has one goal in his last 12 matches in all competitions, and the game ends 2-1 to Peterhead. And like I say, it could have been, they could have snuck away with a point, Spartans, but I think that would have been pretty unjust in terms of the balance of play. I think Peterhead were well worthy of the 3 points, and just things aren't going particularly well for Spartans at the moment.
Spartans were very much Peterhead's bogey team last season as well, which is why this result, although it shouldn't take you by surprise, you do look at it and think, maybe I would have expected if Spartans were going to kickstart their season that Balmoor might have been a place they fancied doing it. And I think there are two issues with the Spartans team that I could see based on those highlights especially that were really made blatantly obvious. That was exactly like you say, a lack of pace in defence. So right across that back four, and including Blair Carswell on that, they've not got a keeper who can race off his line to cover for defenders who are lacking a bit of pace. They just look a bit stodgy. And then going forward, it's that old adage that we always say about Blair Henderson. If he's not scoring, he's not really contributing. But the guys around him aren't either. Cammy Russell, for my money, one of the most impressive players in League Two last season. I think he's got 1 goal in the league this season. I'd expect a wee bit more from Cammy Russell. Jamie Dishington doesn't have any. Bradley White gets a goal in this one. But again, we're expecting Spartans to kick on from where last season ended. It doesn't really feel like they're doing that. And when you break it down, you go, right, you've got a slow defence, you've got a midfield that's struggling to create chances, and you've got a forward three, none of whom are in form, and your talismanic striker is not scoring goals. I mean, this is probably, I'm guessing, the worst goal drought, if that's the right way of putting it, that Blair Henderson's been on in his time at Spartans, because his goal record is ridiculous. You look at it, he's got 3 in League One since August. Him missing a penalty is a real collector's item in itself. Last season he got 27 in 44 games. His goals won them 16 points last season. The Spartans were not a one-man team, but they were really a one-man goal-scoring team. They had Henderson, Cammy Russell chipped in with a good few. Then you had guys like Reece Armstrong, Bradley White, who'd maybe chip in with a few. If Henderson's not scoring, and not scoring at a really, really high level, they don't really have anyone else who can fill that. And although I think it's very early to, be worried about Spartans are well backed, I think that they'll be absolutely fine this season. There must be a wee element just in Spartans fans' minds that is going, this isn't going very well. This isn't going as it should be, and we look like a team who've got a bit of second season syndrome.
Yeah, 100%. And they're now, I think they're 9 points off the playoff places, which, after kind of the way they went last season, getting to the playoff final, I fully expected Spartans to be, right up the top end of League Two this season, to be honest, when, looking at you go through the squad player by player and how they performed last season, I fully expected them to again be pushing for the playoffs, if not pushing for the title all the way. It's one of those things, like what is it that needs to change at Spartans, because it's highly unlikely that they're going to change the manager. I think it's almost certain that that's not going to be the case. Dougie Samuel's he's beloved there, absolutely rightly so. He's pretty much in with the bricks at the club. I don't think they're ever going to see him out the door, but something really needs to change if they want to kick on, because 9 points it's a fairly big gap. But that goes on another 5-6 weeks, that grows to 12, 15, and then you're right off the pace, and you basically go from coming into this season full of confidence, thinking, right, let's go again, let's push for promotion to League One, let's ride this crest of a wave, and it just feels as though the kind of stuffings came out of Spartans for a bit.
It does, and they maybe look a wee bit more now like I expected them to look last season. That's the only way that I can sort of put it in my head, is that this is maybe a wee bit more what I expected them to be like last season in terms of just building and gradually, almost a wee bit like Edinburgh City did, you build up to becoming a team that are pushing for promotion and then eventually getting over that line. Anyway, we have started this podcast on Monday. It is now Wednesday. I promised Craig Fowler it would be round about an hour. I'm doing frantic maths in my head to work out how long the technical gremlins cost us, and I think it is about an hour and 5 minutes. So, listeners, that's value for money because you've had us for 3 days. It might not feel like it, but my goodness, it does to us.
Yeah, it does. I'm surprised that we've actually managed to get to the end of it because, I mean, you may be able to notice this when you're watching / listening, but there's a few times where we had technical hiccups during this recording, but everything seems to have ran smoothly ever since then. So, yeah, no, it's been good to catch up, Fraser, as always. Good to chat lower league Scottish football. I'm sure we'll be drafted in. I'm sure the bat signal will go up at some point again when Craig and Shaughan aren't available and they call in the job squad. But yeah, been good to catch up, been good to chat, even if it did take 3 days.
I couldn't think of a better person to spend 3 days having technical issues with.
That's the best compliment that I think I've ever received of anyone, so thank you.
That's a lovely note to end on. Listeners, thank you for sticking with us during 3 days of podcasting that we have condensed into just an hour and 7 minutes of your time. If you do want more Terrace content than simply 3 days of me and Shaughan, then go to patreon.com/Terrace podcast. You can get extra shows. I think it's about £3 a week or something like that is the cheapest, or £3 a month, is like the cheapest tier. So it really is value for money when you see the amount of effort that me and Shaughan have put into this podcast alone. Multiply that numerous times. But anyway, I will not go on any longer. I'm way over our time limit and we can't afford to be paid any longer. So thank you, listener, and good night.